Good morning. I'm Kristyn Jones with the United Teachers of Richmond. I teach third grade at Lake Elementary School, and I'm really honored to be here with all of you and to have been sitting around the table with Labor Rising for the last few months. It's really been a learning process for me, learning and just watching the true democratic process unfold at the table with Labor Rising. So you have to excuse me while I speechify for just a minute, because I've actually written something. So today I want to talk about charter schools, and so that's what I'm going to do. Charter schools are the biggest threat to public education right now. Betsy DeVos and the threat of vouchers are looming just around the corner, but the dog on our heels presently are charter schools. And charter schools are not only being championed by the far right or even only being championed by the Republican Party, but in California at least are being championed by California Democrats. Jerry Brown, in fact, owns 2 charter schools in Oakland. As far as I know, almost every piece of legislation sponsored by some Democratic politicians in California to make charters more accountable or more transparent has in fact been vetoed on the desk of Jerry Brown. So one thing I wanted to bring to your attention is the fact that charter schools are wrong on principle. One of the reasons why they're wrong is because they're diverting taxpayer money, public money, into private hands. They're using public money, and some of them even call themselves public schools, but they're not under the governance of the publicly elected school board. Instead, their boards are often made up of people from the business community, and certainly their operators are made up of people from the business community. For example, the owner of Caliber Charter School, which operates in Richmond, California, is Ron Beller, and he's a former hedge fund millionaire who made millions of dollars off of the subprime mortgage debacle. Charter schools are also wrong because they don't take all students. In fact, they cherry pick the best and brightest students. They often don't take their fair share of special education students. When they do take special education students, they usually don't take severely handicapped students, but tend to take students with maybe speech impediments or a speech disability or a less intensive learning disability. Charter schools are also wrong on principle because they do not hire a union. So they're taking the public's money, taxpayer money, but in fact, especially with building and also instruction, almost all of the staff, I believe, at charter schools are non-union. For example, there's a charter school in Richmond called Aspire, which is near Hilltop Mall, and they actually flew in non-union labor from Nevada to build their school, and taxpayers funded that. Charter schools start taking money away from the public and are threatening, in fact, to bankrupt public school districts. UTLA commissioned a report last year on the cost of charter schools to LA Unified. And in the report, it came out that charter schools in Los Angeles cost $500 million, yes, billion with a B, cost the district $500 million last year. Oakland, I believe, just announced a spending or hiring freeze, and I believe they're running about a $25 million budget deficit this year. In West Contra Costa Unified School District, where I teach, that's Richmond, San Pablo, Hercules, Pinole, the jury is still out on the economic impact. There hasn't been a study done, but we can see evidence that charter schools are draining district coffers. For example, there are several schools that should have been rebuilt. The district, in fact, promised that these schools were going to be rebuilt. Wilson, Lake Elementary, those are just some of the names that come to mind, and the district is stalling. Clearly, they don't have the money to rebuild these schools. So where is the money going? Some of the money is going to the district's commitments to charter schools. Just last Wednesday, a charter school called Voices was approved. Now, Voices sounds exciting because it's a dual immersion school, and dual immersion offers a lot of really exciting opportunities for students. But the problem, again, is the financial impact on the district. Former trustee Todd Groves said, quote, by approving Voices, the Board of Education cemented a $10 million revenue loss. We need to have straight talk about the effect on remaining students. I'm still quoting Todd Groves, by the way. $10 million will hurt deeply. ELD, which is English Language Development students, and special education students, those populations are not shrinking, and rightfully will consume ever greater shares of diminishing funds, as will pensions. Charter expansion is creating a fiscal crisis while in no way offering new solutions to educating our most needy students. This conversation must happen, end quote. And for just a moment, I want to kind of diverge a little bit and talk about the idea of parent choice. And I think if the schools, public schools in California were funded the way they should be, there'd be plenty of room for parent choice within the school district, within the public school system. The fact of the matter is, I think you probably have heard this, California is the 6th or 8th largest economy in the world, but we're only 46 in the state, in the United States in per pupil spending. So our schools are clearly underfunded. So if they were funded adequately, there would be room within the public school system for choice. Let's see, okay. Okay, so one question that I've asked and that unions are asking is, can charter schools be reformed? Well, I believe the answer is no. If something is wrong on principle, it cannot be reformed. It must be destroyed completely. Thank you. Okay. And I said abolished. And I said, imagine if, for a minute, if people like John Brown, Frederick Douglass, had tried to reform slavery by making the hours shorter or the food better. That would have been ridiculous. Likewise, it's ridiculous to try and reform charter schools. We need a movement for abolition. I see several paths, thank you, forward. There are several paths forward towards abolition. The first place we can start are calls for a moratorium. We need to get unions and cities on board to call on moratoriums. The NAACP, the nation's oldest civil rights organization, in fact, has called on a moratorium. And I'm just going to read from what they wrote for just a second. The NAACP said, we are calling for a moratorium on the expansion of the charter schools at least until such time as charter schools are subject to the same transparency and accountability standards as public schools, public funds are not diverted to charter schools at the expense of the public school system, charter schools cease expelling students that public schools have a duty to educate, and charter schools cease to perpetuate de facto segregation of the highest performing students from those whose aspirations may be high, but whose talents are not yet as obvious, end quote. Another path forward I see could be bringing a lawsuit against Proposition 39. Can you raise your hand if you know what Proposition 39 is? Okay, it seems like some of you know. Okay, I'll try to give you a little background. It's one of the cornerstones of the charter school sham in California. Charter schools were granted rights to public school facilities through Proposition 39, which was passed by California voters about 12 years ago. This law means that public schools have to share facilities with charter schools. So for example, there are some schools in Oakland and Richmond that actually house 2 or 3 different schools on the same property, sometimes a charter school and a public school. Independence High in San Jose's Alum Rock School District actually has 3 charter schools and 1 public high school. You clearly can see this could be a recipe for disaster, just the logistics of having 3 different school bodies, administrations, teachers, 3 different sets of rules, maybe even 3 different age groups. Proposition 39 is unconstitutional. It prevents school districts from taking action to protect their financial integrity by requiring approval of charters regardless of their financial impact. This violates the California Constitution, which requires fiscal integrity of governmental agencies. Proposition 39 violates equal rights to protection of California students by allowing charter schools to opt out of the Field Act in protection of public school students. So basically, charter schools can put their facilities on properties that public schools can't use because maybe they're not safe in the case of an earthquake, they're not earthquake proof, or they've got some chemical spill that happened on the property, or there's some environmental hazard. Charter school students can be placed at that site because they're not subject to the Field Act, which protects public school students. This is discriminatory for charter school students who deserve the same protection as public school students. So, another thing we need to do is get unions and school boards and city councils to protest these illegalities and to support legal action to repeal Proposition 39 and the California Charter Law. Washington State National Education Association chapter actually sued in court against the charter laws and won. So we need to demand that the California Teachers Association and California Federation of Teachers take the same stance. We need to unite parents, students, and teachers in statewide action against the damaging policy of co-location. Okay. The other path forward is preparing to repeal the charter school law in 2018. Okay. We need 2,000 committed people to collect 200 signatures to get this on the ballot. This is the only way we can get rid of charter school parasites once and for all. In order to do all of this work, we need to get unions on board. The problem is that the unions are top-down, anti-democratic tools of establishment politics and not worker-run institutions. So how are we going to get them on board? The unions, for the most part, have not educated their members about the threat of charter schools to public education. For example, at the National Education Association conference last year, I tried to bring a new business item asking for the National Education Association to stop referring to charter schools as public schools, and for the National Education Association to investigate the financial impact of charter schools on public schools. I was blocked at every turn by my own California caucus. Terry Jackson, a member of the United Teachers of Richmond, told me, in fact, that charter schools were public schools because they take public money. And in fact, yeah, I mean, the California caucus actually voted this down. There were many other resolutions brought to the NEA last year, and all of them were referred to committee. So the National Education Association effectively sidestepped making any major policy decisions on charter schools last year. However, this year, the issue will reemerge in Boston at the National Education Association Representative Assembly. Just want to say one last thing. My local United Teachers of Richmond did pass a resolution calling on an end to the expansion of charter schools in our district and an effective moratorium on charter schools. The resolution was passed by the 1,600 members through our Rep Council. The resolution emerged from struggle and dialogue among members and executive board members and our rank and file. It talks about poverty, calls charters out for being anti-union. However, this resolution was suppressed, a substitute resolution was posted on the website, and members were never educated about the resolution or the threat of charters. Our union leadership, in fact, rather than promoting our rank and file resolution, aligned with the California Alliance for Community Schools. This group has put out a platform to make charters more transparent, to reform charters. They claim to have the support of 50,000 teachers statewide, but it is a top-down, paid organizer initiative, not something coming from the rank and file. The platform is weak, and in distinguishing private versus public charter schools, under-regulated versus regulated charter schools, confuses people into thinking there are good and bad charter schools. In fact, no, we need to stop all charter schools. So there's a fight going on against charters, and there's a fight going on in our union, and I hope to talk to you more about it. Please look us up on Facebook. We're called Defend Public Education Now. Thank you.